A Rule of Life by Turgenev. If you want to annoy an opponent truly and even to harm him, said a crafty old knave to me, you reproach him with very defect or vice you are conscious of in yourself. Be indignant and reproach him. To begin with, it will set others thinking you have not that vice. In the second place, your indignation may well be sincere. You can turn to account the pricks of your own conscience. If you, for instance, are turncoat, reproach your opponent with having no convictions. If you are yourself slavish at heart, tell him reproachfully that he is slavish, the slave of civilization of Europe and socialism. One might even say the slave of anti-slavishness, I suggest. You might even do that, assented a cunning knave. A Visit by Turgenev. I was sitting at the open window in the early morning of the 1st May. The dawn had not yet begun, but already the dark, warm night grew pale and chill at its approach. No mist had risen, no breeze was astir, all was colourless and still, but the nearness of the awakening could be felt, and the rare air smelled keen and moist with dew. Suddenly, at the open window with a light whir and rustle, a great bird flew into my room. I started, looked closely at it. It was not a bird. It was a tiny winged woman dressed in a narrow long robe flowing to her feet. She was grey all over, the colour of mother of pearl. Only the inner side of the wings glowed with the tender flush of an opening rose. A wreath of valley lilies entwined with scattered curls upon a little round head. And like a butterfly's feelers, two peacock feathers waved truly above the lovely rounded brill. She fluttered thrice about the ceiling. Her tiny face was laughing too were her great clear black eyes. A gay frolic of a sportive flight set them flashing like diamonds. She held in her hand the long stalk of a flower of the steppes, the Tsar's sceptre, the Russians call it. It is really like a sceptre. Flying rapidly above me, she touched my head with the flower. I rushed towards her, but already she had fluttered out of the window and darted away. In the garden, in a thicket of lilac bushes, a wood dove greeted her with its first morning warble, and where she vanished, a milk-white sky flushed a soft pink. I know the god is a fantasy, or didst pay me a random visit by the way, thou hast flown on to the young poets, her poesy, youth, Virginia beauty of woman. Thou couldst shine for me but for a moment in the early dawn of early spring. Friend and Enemy by Turgenev. A prisoner condemned to confinement for life broke out of his prison and took the headlong flight. After him, just on his heels, flew his guiltless in pursuit. He ran with all his might. His pursuers began to be left behind. But behold, before him was a river with precipitous banks, a narrow but deep river, and he could not swim. A thin rotten plank had been thrown across from one bank to the other. The fugitive already had his foot upon it, but it so happened that just where beside the river stood his best friend and his bitterest enemy. His enemy said nothing. He merely folded his arms, but the friend shrieked at the top of his voice, "Heavens! What are you doing? Madman, think what you are about. You don't see the plank's utterly rotten. It will break under your weight, and it will inevitably perish. Well, there is no other way to cross, and don't you hear them in pursuit?" Groaned the poor wretch in despair, and he stepped on the plank. "I won't allow it. No, I won't allow you to rush to destruction," cried his zealous friend, and he snatched the plank from under the fugitive. The latter instantly fell into the boiling torrent and drowned. The enemy smiled complacently and walked away, and the friend sat down on the bank and fell to weeping bitterly over his poor friend. To blame himself for his destruction did not, however, occur to him, not for an instant. "He would not listen to me, he would not listen," he murmured dejectedly. Though indeed, he added at last, he would have had, to be sure, to languish his whole life long in an awful prison. At any rate, he's out of suffering now, he's better off now. Such was bound to be his fate, I suppose. And yet I am sorry, from humane feeling. And the kind soul continued to sob inconsolably over the fate of his misguided friend. Nature by Turgenev. A dream there had come into an immense underground temple with lofty arched roof, and was filled with a sort of underground uniform light. In the very middle of the temple sat a majestic woman in a flowing robe of green colour. Her head propped on a hand, she seemed buried in deep thought. At once I was aware that this woman was nature herself, and a thrill of reverent awe sent an instantaneous shiver through my inmost soul. I approached the sitting figure, and making a respectful bow. "O common mother of us all," I cried, "of what is thy meditation? Is it of the future destinies of man thou ponderest, or how we may attain the highest possible perfection and happiness?" The woman slowly turned upon me her dark menacing eyes. Her lips moved, and I heard a ringing voice like the clang of iron. "I am thinking how to give greater power to the leg muscles of a flea, that he may more easily escape from his enemies. The balance of attack and defence is broken, it must be restored." "What?" I faltered in reply. "What is it thou thinking upon? But are we men thy favourite children?" The woman frowned slightly. "All creatures are my children," she pronounced, "and I care for them alike, and all alike I destroy. But right, reason justice, I faltered again. Was a man's words. I heard the iron voice saying, I know not right nor wrong, reason is no law for me, and what is justice? I have given thee life, I shall take it away and give to others. Worms or man, I cannot. Do thou meanwhile look out for thyself and hinder me not. I would have retort, but the earth uttered a hollow groan and shuddered, and I awoke. On the Sea, by Ivan Turgenev. I was going from Hamburg to London in a small steamer. We were 2 passengers, I and a little female monkey, whom a Hamburg merchant was sending as a present to his English partner. She was fastened by a light chain to one of the seats on deck, and was moving restlessly and whining in a little plaintive pipe like a bird's. Every time I passed by her she stretched out her little black cold hand and peeped up at me out of her little mournful, almost human eyes. I took her hand, and she ceased whining and moving restlessly about. There was a dead calm. The sea stretched on all sides like a motionless shed of leaden colour. I seemed narrowed and small. A thick fog overhung it, hiding the very mast tops and cloud, and dazing and wearing the eyes with its soft obscurity. The sun hung a dull red blue in this obscurity, but before evening is clouded with strange, mysterious, lurid light. Long, straight folds, like the folds in some heavy silken stuff, passed one after another over the sea from the ship's prow, and broadening as they passed, and wrinkling and widening, they smothered out again with a shake and vanished. The foam flew up, churned by the tediously thudding wheels, white as milk. With a faint hiss it broke up into serpentine eddies, and then melted together again and vanished too, swallowed up by the mist. Persistent and plaintive as a monkey's whine rang the small bell at the stern. From time to time a porpoise swam up, and with a sudden roll disappeared below the scarcely ruffled surface. And the captain, a silent man with a gloomy, sunburned face, smoked a short pipe and angrily spat into the dull, stagnant sea. To all my inquiries he responded with a disconnected grumble. I was obliged to turn to my sole companion, the monkey. I sat down beside her. She ceased whining, and again held out her hand to me. The clinching fog oppressed us both with its drowsy dampness, and buried in the same unconscious dreaminess, we sat side by side like brother and sister. I smile now, but then I had another feeling. We are all children of one mother, and I was glad that the poor little beast was soothed and nestled so confidentially up to me as to a brother. The Beggar, by Ivan Turgenev. I was walking along the street. I was stopped by a decrepit old beggar. Bloodshot, tearful eyes, blue lips, coarse rags, festering wounds. How hideously poverty had eaten into the miserable creature. He held out to me a red, swollen, filthy hand. He groaned, he mumbled of help. I began feeling in all my pockets. A purse, no watch, not even a handkerchief. I had taken nothing with me. The beggar was still waiting, and his outstretched hand fell with shock and trembled. Confused, abashed, I warmly clasped the filthy, shaking hand. Don't be angry, brother. I have nothing, brother. The beggar stared at me with his bloodshot eyes. His blue lips smiled, and he in his turn gripped my chilly fingers. What of it, brother? He mumbled. Thanks for this too. That is a gift too, brother. I knew that I too had received a gift from my brother. The Dog, by Ivan Turgenev. Us two in a room, my dog and me. Outside a fearful storm is howling. The dog sits in front of me and looks me straight in the face, and I, too, look into his face. He wants, it seems, to tell me something. He's dumb, he's without words, he does not understand himself, but I understand him. I understand that at this instant there is a living in him, and in me the same feeling. There is no difference between us. We are the same. In each of us there burns and shines the same trembling spark. Death sweeps down with a wave of its chill broad wing. And the end? Who then can discern what was the spark that glowed in each of us? No, we are not beast and man who glance at one another. We are the eyes of equals, those eyes united on one another. And in each of us, in the beast and in the man, the same love huddles up and fear close to the other. The Fool, by Ivan Turgenev. There lived the fool. For a long time he lived in peace and contentment. But by degrees the rumors began to reach him that he was regarded on all sides as a vulgar idiot. The fool was abashed and began to ponder gloomily how he might put an end to these unpleasant rumors. A sudden idea at last illuminated his dull little brain. Without the slightest delay he put it into practice. A friend met him in the street and fell to praising a well-known painter. "Upon my word," cried the fool, "that painter was out of date long ago. You didn't know it? I should never have expected it of you. You are quite behind the times." The friend was alarmed and promptly agreed with the fool. "Such a splendid book I read yesterday," said another friend to him. "Upon my word," cried the fool, "Anan, the notorious scoundrel. You swindled all his relations. Everyone knows it. You're quite behind the times." The third friend too was alarmed, and he agreed with the fool and deserted his friend. And whoever and whatever was praised in the fool's presence, he had the same retort for everything. Sometimes he would add reproachfully, "And do you still believe in authorities?" Spiteful, malignant, his friends began to say of the fool, "But what a brain!" And what a ton! Ours will add. Oh yes, he has talent. It ended in the editor of a journal proposing to the fool that he should undertake the reviewing column, and the fool fell to criticizing everything and everyone, without in the least changing his manner or his exclamations. Now he, who once declaimed against authorities, is himself an authority, and the young men venerate him and fear him. What else can they do, poor young man, though one ought not, as a general rule, to venerate any one. But in this case, if one didn't venerate him, one would find oneself quite behind the times. Fools have a good time among cowards. The Insect, by Ivan Turgenev. I dreamed that we were sitting, a party of 20, in a big room with open windows. Among us were women, children, and old men. We were all talking of some very well-known subject, talking noisily and indistinctly. Suddenly, with a sharp, whirring sound, there flew into the room a big insect, 2 inches long. It flew in, circled round, and settled on the wall. It was like a fly or wasp, its body dirty-colored, of the same color to its flat, stiff wings, outspread feathered claws, and head thick and angular like a dragon's flies. Both head and claws were bright red, as though steeped in blood. The strange insect incessantly turned its head up and down, to right and to left, moved its claws, and suddenly darted from the wall, flew with a whirring sound about the room, and again settled, again hateful and loathsomely wrinkled all over, without stirring from the spot. In all of us it exceeded a sensation of loathing, dread, even terror. No one of us had ever seen anything like it. We all cried, "Drive that monstrous thing away!" and waved our handkerchiefs at it from a distance, but no one ventured to go up to it. When the insect began flying, everyone instinctively moved away. Only one of our party, a pale-faced young man, stared at us all in amazement. He shrugged his shoulders, he smiled, and positively could not convince what had happened to us. And we were in such a state of excitement. He himself did not see an insect at all, did not hear the ill-omened whir of its wings. All at once the insect seemed to stare at him, darted off and dropped on his head, stung him on the forehead above the eyes. The young man fairly groaned and fell dead. The fearful fly flew out at once. Only when we guessed what it was had visited us. The Last Meeting, by Ivan Turgenev. We had once been close and warm friends, but an unlucky moment came, and we parted as enemies. Many years passed by, and coming to the town where he lived, I learned that he was helplessly ill and wished to see me. I made my way to him, went into his room, our eyes met. I hardly knew him. God, what sickness had done to him. Yellow, wrinkled, completely bald, with a scanty grey beard, he sat clothed in nothing but a shirt purposely slit open. He could not bear the weight of even the lightest clothes. Jerkily he stretched out to me his fearfully thin hand that looked as if it were gnawed away, with an effort muttering a few indistinct words, whether of welcome or reproach who can tell. His emaciated chest heaved, and over the dwindled pupils of his kindling eyes rolled 2 hard-wrung tears of suffering. My heart sank. I sat down on a chair beside him, and involuntarily dropped my eyes before the horror and hideousness of it. I too held out my hand. But it seemed to me that it was not his hand that took hold of me. It seemed to me that between us is sitting a tall, still white woman. A long robe shows her from head to foot. Her deep, pale eyes look into vacancy. No sound is uttered by her pale, stern lips. This woman has joined our hands. She has reconciled us forever. Yes, death has reconciled us. The Old Man, by Ivan Turgenev. Days of darkness, of dreariness have come. My own infirmities, the sufferings of those dear to thee, the chill and gloom of old age, all that thou hast left, to which thou hast given thyself irrevocable, is falling, going to pieces. The way is all downhill. What canst thou do? Grieve, complain, or wilt aid not thyself nor others with way? On the bowed and withering trees the leaves are smaller and fewer, but its green is yet the same. Do thou too shrink within, withdraw into thyself, into thy memories, and where deep down in the very depths of the soul turned inwards on itself, the old life to which thou alone hast the key, will be bright again for thee, in all the fragrance, all the fresh green, and the grace and power of its spring. But beware, look not forward, poor old man. The Reporter, by Ivan Turgenev. 2 friends were sitting at a table drinking tea. A sudden hubbub arose in the street. We heard piteous groans, furious abuse, bursts of malignant laughter. "Beating someone," observed one of the friends, looking out of window. "A criminal, a murderer," inquired the other. "I say, whatever he may be, we can't allow this illegal chastisement. Let's go and take his part." "But it's not a murderer beating." "Not a murderer? Is it a thief then? It makes no difference. Let's go and get him away from the crowd." "It's not a thief either." "Not a thief? Is it an absconding cashierman, a railroad director, an army contractor, a Russian art patron, a lawyer, a conservative editor, a social reformer? Anyway, let's go and help him." "No, it's a newspaper reporter we're beating." "A reporter? I'll tell you what, we'll finish our glasses of tea first way." The Rose, by Ivan Turgenev. The last days of August. Autumn was already at hand. The sun was setting. A sudden downpour of rain without thunder or lightning had just passed rapidly over our wide plain. The garden in front of the house glowed and steamed, all filled with the fire of the sunset and the deluge of rain. She was sitting at a table in the drawing room, and with persistent dreaminess gazing through the half-open door into the garden. I knew what was passing at that moment in her soul. I knew that, after a brief but agonizing struggle, she was at that instant given herself up to feelings she could not longer master. All at once she got up, and went quickly out into the garden and disappeared. An hour passed, a second, she had not returned. When I got up, and getting out of the house, I turned along the walk by which, of it I had no doubt, she had gone. All was darkness about me, the night had already fallen, but on the damp sand of a path a roundish object could be discerned, bright red even though the mist. I stopped down. It was a fresh, new-blown rose. 2 hours before I had seen this very rose on the bosom. I carefully picked up the flower that had fallen in the mud, and going back to the drawing-room, laid it on the table before her chair. And now at last she came back, and with light footsteps crossing the whole room, sat down at the table. Her face was both paler and more vivid, and Donka's eyes that looked somehow smaller strayed rapidly in happy confusion from side to side. She saw the rose, snatched it up, glanced at its crushed and muddy petals, glanced at me, and her eyes brought suddenly to a standstill, were bright with tears. "What are you crying for?" I asked. "Why, see this rose, look what has happened to it." When I thought fit to utter a profound remark, "Your tears will wash away the mud," I pronounced with a significant expression. "Tears do not wash away burn," she answered, and turning to the heart she flung the rose into the dying flame. "Fire burns even better than tears," she cried with spirit, and her lovely eyes, still bright with tears, laughed boldly and happily. I saw that she too had been in the fire. The Skulls by Turgenev. A sumptuous, brilliantly lighted hall, a number of ladies and gentlemen. All the faces are animated, the talk is lively, a noisy conversation is being carried on about a famous singer. We call her divine, immortal. Oh, how finally yesterday she rendered her last thrill. And suddenly, as by the wave of an enchanter's wand, from every head and from every face slipped off a delicate covering of skin and instantaneously exposed the deadly whiteness of skulls, with here and there the leaden shimmer of bare jaws and gums. With horror I beheld the movement of those jaws and gums, the turning, the glistening in the light of the lamps and candles, of those lumpy bony balls, and the rolling in them of other smaller balls, the balls of the meaningless eyes. I dared not touch my own face, dared not glance at myself in the glass. The skulls turned from side to side as before, and with a former noise peeping like a little red rex out of her grinning teeth, rapid hums lisped how marvelously, how inimitable the immortal singer had rendered her last thrill. The Sparrow by Turgenev. I was returning from hunting, and walking along an avenue of a garden, my dog running in front of me. Suddenly he took shorter steps and began to steal along as for tracking game. I looked along the avenue and saw a young sparrow, with yellow about its beak and down on its head. It had fallen out of the nest, the wind was violently shaking the birch trees in the avenue, and sat unable to move, helplessly flipping its half-grown wings. My dog was slowly approaching it, and suddenly darting down from a tree close by. An old dark-throated sparrow fell like a stone right before his nose, and all ruffled up, terrified, with despairing and pitiful cheeps, it flung itself twice towards the open jaws of shining teeth. I sprang to save. It cast itself before its nestling, but all its tiny body was shaking with terror. Its note was harsh and strange. Swooning with fear, it offered itself up. What a huge monster must the dog have seemed to it. Yet it could not stay on its high branch out of danger. A force stronger than its will flung it down. My treasure stood still, drew back. Clearly he too recognized the force. I hastened to call off the disconsolate dog and went away full of reverence. Yes, do not laugh. I felt reverence for the tiny heroic bird, for its impulse of love. Love I thought is stronger than death or fear of death. Only by it, by love, life holds together and advances. The Stone by Turgenev. Have you seen an old grey stone on the seashore? When a high tide on a sunny day of spring, the living waves break upon it on all sides, break and frolic and caress it, and sprinkle over its sea-mossed head with scattered pearls of sparkling foam? The stone is still the same stone, but its silent surface blossoms out into bright colours. They tell of those far-off days when the molten granite had but begun to harden and was all aglow with the hues of fire. Even so of late was my old heart surrounded, broken in upon a rush of fresh girls' souls, and under their caressing touch it flushed with long-faded colours, the traces of burnt-out fires. The waves have ebbed back, but the colours are not yet dull, though a cutting wind is drying them. What shall I think? By Turgenev. What shall I think when I come to die? If only I am in the condition to think anything when. Shall I think how little use I have made of my life, how I have slumbered, dozed through it, how little I have known how to enjoy its gifts? What? Is this death? So soon? Impossible. Why, I have had no time to do anything yet. I have only been making ready to begin. Shall I recall the past and dwell and fond on the few bright moments I have lived through, on precious images and faces? Will my ill deeds come back to my mind, and will my soul be stung by the burning pain of remorse too late? Shall I think of what awaits me beyond the grave? And in truth, does anything await me there? No, I fancy I shall not try to think. I shall force myself to take interest in some trifles simply to distract my own attention from the menacing darkness which is black before me. I once saw a dying man who kept complaining they would not let him have hazelnuts too much, and only in the depths of his fast dimming eyes something quivering and struggling like a torn wing of a bird wounded to death.